Considering Scott had the whole 3-movie trilogy planned out to a point where the actual rough draft outline for the second film was already completely finished before the first was even released, I wouldn't be surprised if
Guys, what? Yo! How did I just now notice, man? What? Oh my god, there's a sequel to this Fnaf movie? Dude! You know what? I was just saying this a few days ago when I saw the movie. And I was like, maybe there's a sequel to this Fnaf movie. But I was like, no. After what they did for the first one, and it took them 8 years to make, I don't think there's a sequel. I guess I was wrong. I was just kidding when I said it too. Oh my god. Oh my god. This is so cool. Oh my god. I'm gonna have to look at some videos about this movie because I cannot wait for the movie whenever it comes out. Oh my god. This is insane. Everybody's going crazy right now about this. Oh my god. Alright, I'm gonna have to go on YouTube about this. Oh my god, there's no way this is real. There's no way this is real. I'm gonna look it up on YouTube. I know that's a fan-made picture there for the Fnaf movie too, but like, wow, there's no way. Like, the first movie just came out not even a week ago, and yet, well, technically it did for people who saw it early, but like, wow, this is crazy, man. So, Scott Cawthon responds to Fnaf movie 2. Which one should I watch first? From this same person, internet. You know what? I'm gonna have to watch this one. And guys, I will link both of these videos in the description below because I will be watching both of them. So, alright, here's video number 1 here.
Scott's official statements regarding everything we know about a FNAF movie sequel help paint us a picture of what we're meant to see in the actual film and if the sequel is truly meant to be coming or not. Scott Cawthon's original statements that link towards our expectations following the original Five Nights at Freddy's movie show us that he's actually nothing but supportive towards a second installment after the first, only on one condition. This is going to be the important part. During a Markiplier live stream, he sums up the start, at the very least, of what we know about his take on the situation by stating, if we're fortunate enough to get to work on a sequel, which is basically him referencing the idea of follow-up movies occurring in the near future based on the one condition I'll reveal later in this video, then hopefully we will have another shot at getting the king of FNAF into the FNAF movie. I can't wait for Iron Lung in the meantime. While for starters, his original statement throws Markiplier in the mix regarding future films as he was unable to be involved the first time around for filming. It's also going to be incredibly important to add in what he's revealed regarding the filmmaking process going forwards from this recently released movie beforehand. This is going to be the main part that connects us into the present day. We're told specifically, back in August 2018, Scott Cawthon, the creator of the video game series, reportedly mentioned in a Steam community forum post that if the first film were successful, 2 more films would be made based on the second and third video games. Cawthon also mentioned that he had already written an outline for the second film. At the very least, this confirms what we already assumed about the 3-picture deal that was put into place already. While this 3-movie deal acts as a common practice amongst movie studios in general, Scott's statements tell us that it's 100% the intent of the production studio to actually follow through with it, as long as the one condition I mentioned is fully met. So the proof, following Scott's reasoning and all of the information released so far, tells us the one condition he had for the sequel movie to actually be produced was actually already fulfilled. This next film is definitely coming up soon. In terms of revealing what exactly that condition was meant to be, we're able to gather insight through what his fellow project directors say. The actual producer of the movie, Emma Tammy, and the production studio owner Jason Blum, as they obviously have a huge influence on how matters are handled here.
Hey,
and we know regarding the sequel Five Nights at Freddy's movie,
I wish she had more
Emma herself tells us, I think we would all be really excited to dive into that if this one does well. But if it seems like audiences have an appetite for that, we would be so excited to make it. Basically, it all comes down to the audience's actual perception of the film and the portrayal of the characters in the first place. Even Matthew Lillard himself attests to the idea of the film being created for the actual fans of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise to give them the experience that perfectly encapsulates all of the lore and characters they already know and love. It's meant to be a big deal to them. The success in the eyes of the fans prompting the next movie is actually Scott's reasoning as well, considering he uses the phrasing, "if we're lucky enough to produce a follow-up film," connecting back to essentially what the actual director told us. And in terms of that very topic, what's meant to solidify in the creation of the movie to continue off of the first Five Nights at Freddy's film events, we know the first movie ended up with a whopping 89% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. And despite it not doing so hot in the eyes of critics, we know the film to have been created for the fans in the first place, as I said. Accompany this massive win for the recently released project with the fact it had a $130 million opening with only a $20 million budget. The people behind this massive project more than 6x to their money, meaning overall, we are getting a second movie. It is happening, end of story. And it turns out, knowing the sequel is on its way following the first Five Nights at Freddy's film, we have some huge new insight on everything to know regarding the film itself. Namely, an update on the highly anticipated cameo for the film, the YouTuber known as the King of Fnaf, who is connected with Scott Cawthon's statements that basically tell us he's very likely to show up in the sequel. It was actually revealed as of very recently what the original role that was meant to be associated with Markiplier was actually meant to be, as pushing it over to a sequel could spell out his involvement in movie number 2. Joshua J. Bow tells us, do note that MatPat had showed the other actor's wardrobe in the behind-the-scenes footage he made, and Markiplier was on the wall to be the first security guard that dies at the beginning of the movie. Basically one of the highlighted night guard roles that would have him off screen pretty early on. We get a perfect connection into what this could spell out regarding the sequel by what a commenter tells us. Things happen for a reason. The schedule conflict could be a blessing in disguise for Mark.
For real.
This way, he doesn't have to be killed in the first few minutes of the film, and maybe he will have an even bigger role. It's likely, however, that the security guard role he was supposed to play would get transitioned into the FNAF 2 related equivalent. Psst, it's gonna be Jeremy. Have already been highlighted to us to reveal everything meant to actually be going on in the next film. It all connects to, for starters, a secret message actually found in the Five Nights at Freddy's movie post-credit sequence, in which we hear a message that spells out the letters, "Come find me." This huge Easter egg tying into future events is what many originally grouped together with the puppet character, as the puppet's music box is heard right before the message is played. But it goes even further based on the fact that the puppet is actually meant to be possessed by Mike's brother in the film. That's right.
Wow,
essentially the most important part of this that's even further backed up by the theory that Mike's father is meant to be a representation for Henry Emily, William Afton's business partner in the games who helps with the creation of the animatronics. In the training video, we see a man doing just that, working on animatronics, who ends up looking pretty identical to Mike's dad in the first place. It could also explain why William Afton has a strong reaction to hearing Mike's last name after going through his file. It simply brought up old memories of his ex-business partner and his son. Making this Henry correlation with Mike's dad is essentially all the proof we need to show that just like the games, it's likely Henry's child is again meant to be used to be the puppet after their death. It perfectly syncs everything together with the game's concepts, and is meant to finally give us insight into the situation regarding his family's past. As we know, Spring Bonnie is responsible for his disappearance, but don't know the exact whereabouts of his brother's remains. As for more solidified information that connects to what we should expect for the sequel, we're specifically told that this follow-up movie is meant to be a sequel, not in fact a prequel, like we see originally with our games transitioning from Five Nights at Freddy's 1 to Five Nights at Freddy's 2. It explains why near the end of the movie, Abby asks if they're allowed to revisit her animatronic friends later in the future. But we also know in fact that Scott Cawthon has revealed the outline for this very film has already been worked on. It's meant to correlate with the new story that slightly deviates from the original lore Five Nights at Freddy's fans are more familiar with. Essentially, the FNAF 2 themes are basically undoubtedly meant to accompany future events in the movie's timeline. We see more proof of this concept, in fact, based on the idea that there's another hint we receive after the FNAF 2 music box song, namely a new sound similar to the FNAF 2 menu song. We can also throw the presence of Balloon Boy into the mix here to spell out just how strong the themes are relating to FNAF 2. The most important element here, however, in terms of revealing our leaked information about a sequel to the FNAF movie, is gonna be our additional secrets that spell out everything you're gonna need to know. I actually put together the entire story of what was released in this video right here. So for the full insight into the situation, make sure to check it out. We have all new director comments, statements from Scott Cawthon himself, and even details regarding Markiplier's involvement in terms of the sequel to the recently released Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Now, in terms of the sequel being launched and thrown into production, obviously the concept that fans are looking for in terms of having a sequel in the first place, we're able to get some key insight into the direction we're likely headed in before getting into the actual official statements that were made by some of the people involved with production. It turns out in a recent interview with Fortune, Jason Blum, who takes the role of the head of the Blumhouse production studio associated with the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, basically he's a pretty important dude with all of this, revealed that the recently released film was already in the clear in terms of the success requirements, with the streaming and theatrical distribution rights making up for its budget costs to make the film in the first place. Essentially, the studio and everyone involved have the money necessary to make the sequel guaranteed to them. Despite the fact that Blumhouse is known for its more humble approach to horror in general, it's kind of hard to hide the success of the Five Nights at Freddy's film, as the franchise was a massively successful name before the film was ever even pitched in the first place. Basically, this success caused the finances to break even in regards to the amount spent versus the amount they ended up making back for the movie. Somehow, before the actual release of the movie in the first place, the project has managed to make up for the $20 million budget it required, just showing how the success of the first film is likely to bring on the sequels that many Five Nights at Freddy's fans are now hopeful for. And in terms of making this wish come true, we know based on released information, and namely an interview featuring one of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie stars, Matthew Lillard himself, that he was signed specifically for a 3-movie deal. This is going to be the important part, because although this might seem like the end of the story in regards to making this next film happen, as a 3-movie deal would obviously require 2 more movies, this is where the issue actually comes into play. The meaning behind this sort of 3-picture deal means it doesn't require 3 specific movies, even if that's the intent, just 3 appearances from the actor. So if a multi-picture franchise doesn't do as well as expected and gets canceled, the actor may end up appearing in an unrelated movie to satisfy the remaining terms of the contract. Basically, it's a common practice among studios just to be safe, and that alone, it doesn't guarantee that the sequel of the movies are to be made. But because of the structure of the Five Nights at Freddy's series in general, and the insane amount of content material from the games that the production team would be able to cover, it's likely the intent, at least, of the creators to make these other 2 films happen as well. It all depends, however, on the actual success of the movie, and if it's able to gather enough hype to inspire the continuation of the series over film. It's gotta do good before number 2 gets here. So in terms of the sequel making process, the most important of this entire thing leading into its creation ties to what the people behind the project say. Basically everything they think after the conclusion of their first film. And it turns out we're able to gather additional insight into that very topic. The actual movie director, Emma Tammy, and the Blumhouse CEO associated with the creation of the movie, Jason Blum, have begun talking to the press about their thoughts with the whole process going forwards. At NYCC 2023, Jason Blum had some fun ideas of potential crossovers to actually do in regards to the whole thing, assuming that everything lined up correctly in the future. And all the while, we get further comment from the director Tammy, who has outright said she hopes to be able to do a sequel and even a trilogy, essentially the whole 3-picture deal that was previously mapped out as a common practice if audiences responded well to this movie. Talking to Inverse, she stated, "Yes, I would for sure. I think we would all be excited to dive into that if this one does well, and if it seems like audiences have an appetite for that, we would be so excited to make it." Allegedly, this is very similar to what the director was recorded saying regarding future installments after the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie in the past, so it's likely That means everything throughout the entire production process has gone how she expected it to. All we're seeing is good news in terms of making this thing happen and continuing along with a contract to produce the other two films. They obviously don't have to worry financially, at least, about the project and its direction. But in terms of the most important element of the concept behind a second Five Nights at Freddy's movie in the first place, we need to cover what was said about Markiplier, essentially the biggest, most influential part of the franchise, as his videos served such a huge role in the community, and he still ended up not making an appearance in the first film as many fans were hoping for. His reasoning came down to a scheduling clash between the Five Nights at Freddy's movie and his own movie, Iron Lung, which ended all his hopes of appearing in the film. Markiplier himself stated, "It was supposed to happen. There was a time it was supposed to occur, and unfortunately, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie and my movie, Iron Lung, were being filmed at the exact same time. It was nothing more than it just so happening to be a conflict of schedule." And despite that, Markiplier was attempting, at least, to make it work the first time, as he was supposed to be out there for filming for 2 days. But unfortunately, it was one of those things where he needed every second he could to make his own movie what it needed to be. He had to make the right call with the situation. And we know continuing onwards after the release of the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie, there's actually more hinting towards his re-involvement than you might think. During the live stream that Markiplier announced to his fans he wouldn't be making an appearance in the film, there was a comment made by Scott Cawthon himself that paints us a new picture with the whole situation. His comment reads, "If we're fortunate enough to get to work on a sequel, then hopefully we will have another shot at getting the king of Fnaf into a Fnaf movie. I cannot wait for Iron Lung in the meantime," which basically confirms that the company, at least, is doing everything in their power to continue to push for Markiplier's involvement towards a sequel project to their first film. Scott himself even references the success of the movie, again having something to do with the new installment being made in the first place. And with the massive wave of hype that's been circulating this project for years at this point, it's no wonder we already see the huge potential in terms of actually making it all happen. And in terms of what this continuation would be meant to look like, we have some pretty strong insight into the actual Five Nights at Freddy's sequel potential. Obvious spoiler warnings here, as we're actually given a secret message here at the very end of the credit sequence that tells us what to expect. A secret audio of which we hear the letters that spell out, "Come find me," tying the whole thing into future events.
I already know that.
So in terms of finding the meaning of this secret and its connection to the sequel, we know that right before the actual message, the sound from the FNAF 2 music box is played. The same music box associated with the puppet character, meaning it could have something to do with a cliffhanger that's meant to tie into the puppet's involvement. Not to mention that the secret message we hear has a perfect correlation to the Save Them minigame that, wouldn't you know, could be found in FNAF 2, as well as the miniature Balloon Boy toy that we see at the end of the physical film itself. It's all tying into FNAF 2 related themes, meaning the story would likely follow into a similar sequence as the games, with a sequel movie introducing us to the toy animatronics and everything relating to a second game. And we have even further insight, it turns out, into the future of the franchise regarding the games as well. We know recently released leaks and insider information points us towards a secret game that no one actually knows about. Steelwool higher-ups reveal what direction they wanted this secret game to go in, and even leave little Easter eggs in their other projects that hint at what it's meant to be. I put together all the pieces regarding its secrets and leaked information, so for the full story regarding Five Nights at Freddy's hidden game, make sure to check it out.
The title says so. Alright, I guess I'll try to look for the release date from this guy. Alright, so I think I found a video that can pretty much, oh yeah, here we go.
Wanted it. For starters, we can look at what journalists covering the situation say, as they predict when we're meant to see this. The first movie took around 2 months to film, and then had 6 months of...
Wow, 2 months to film? So I heard they were filming from February to April of this year. Took them 2 months to film. Wow. Alright.
Post-production, assuming another half year or so would be needed for development.
I guess that's the expected release date. So let me read this real quick. Assuming another half year or so would be needed for development. If we got confirmation on a sequel by the end of 2023, then we could be looking at an early 2025 release date. Alright. Wow. If we get something by the end of this year. Alright.
If we got confirmation on a sequel by the end of 2023, then we would be looking at an early 2025 release date. It turns out, however, we're able to look at an even more accurate representation of what we're meant to be looking at for the sequel based on what the YouTuber known as Deducer says. He's recently revealed a source that's proven to be connected with the project behind the scenes, claiming the sequel movie, after being completely greenlit, should begin filming around mid to late 2024 next year. Additionally, the physical release date would be set around mid to late 2025. Considering Scott had the whole 3-movie trilogy planned out to a point where the actual rough draft outline for the second film was already completely finished before the first was even released, I wouldn't be surprised if filming dates were already set into place too. We knew that Scott Cawthon and the higher-ups involved with the filmmaking process were simply waiting for the positive audience reception, as they set out with the intention of making something special for the fans, so honestly having a schedule in the back of his pocket for the 2025 release date does sound like a feasible possibility. However, we also know that there's a huge problem that arises from the whole ongoing situation and its development. The leaker connected to all of these important.
Wow, so the release date, wow. So the second movie was already done before the first Fnaf movie was even released. So I had to say that the second movie could have been done before October even this year. I would say September, maybe August. I don't know, guys. But yeah, that's crazy. So we're actually getting a sequel to this movie now, man. Like, I was literally just joking around saying that they will make a sequel of the movie. And sure enough, I was right. Wow. And they were done with the entire second movie before even the first movie released. Dang. I did not expect that, but alright. So, that's it for today's video, guys. So if you guys are excited for the second Fnaf movie, let me know in the comments below. And let's expect a lot of Fnaf movie 2 trailers coming out pretty soon. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!